Hello, everyone. I'm David Garnes, and I'd like to welcome you all to the Little Theatre of Manchester. Now, I'm literally at home, as you might expect during this period that we're going through, as is our guest, Scott Kegler. But I think in spirit, let's pretend that we're all at Cheney Hall and things are back to normal. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Scott Kegler, playwright and author of the play that we're going to be talking about, The Ladykilling of Chattanooga. We're going to be doing a reading of this play twice next week on Tuesday, September 22nd and Thursday, September 24th. We're taping this reading a week ahead. I'm not sure when you're going to be actually watching it, but so the two dates to keep in mind for the actual showing are September 22nd and September 24th. And you can find a link. If you go to the website of the Little Theatre of Manchester, it will tell you how to proceed in terms of tuning in. So, hello, Scott.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm good. And you?
Living the dream as best we can, right? And
Yeah, really. I'm not
time.
sure what kind of dream it is.
Yeah.
They sort of just fall into each other for me. All the things I usually am doing have been canceled. You know, I do a lot of public speaking and things like that. Nothing. You know, my calendar is, but it's filling up a little bit with things like this, which I'm happy about. Scott, why don't we begin? If you would just say a little bit about yourself, you know, I guess focusing on the fact that you're a playwright, but anything else you'd like to tell us. I know that you're a familiar face to a lot of people at the Little Theatre of Manchester and regionally in the theater world, but some may not know of your past accomplishments. So talk a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, like I work as a playwright in Connecticut as far as working in the arts and the theater community. I have written a number of full-length plays, one acts in New England area and a few other states in the country, but mostly focused in the New England area. Doing as a playwright, I've also directed some shows for various theaters in the area. My background specifically is in directing and acting, but I've been working on various shows in Connecticut of my own full length since probably around 2013 in the state.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, before that, I've worked in event entertainment and working in a lot of mass performance, commedia dell'arte through a troupe of mine as well, but also various just event entertainment type of performance.
Right, and usually behind the scenes, have you done acting or?
As far as acting, I mean, I've done my fair share of work on stage. Mm-hmm. My passion really is for like more of interactive theater though, and doing commedia dell'arte is definitely a strong passion of mine. Kind of clowning background with various characters I've created over the years that I've done at festivals, fairs, theaters. That's definitely been a passion of mine and influenced a lot of my writing, which, you know, for the most part, I think I was for a long time mostly considered just strictly like a comedic writer in the area, usually brought in for more of my absurdist kind of pieces or shows or a little bit zanier. It wasn't until like I put some dramas out or dramedies that you get taken seriously in a different way. People love to have a comedian around, but then if you want to bring comedy to kind of serious issues, social issues, it was a little more fun, and I think I was able to challenge myself more as a writer. So then I've been more focused on that for the last 5-6 years.
Yeah, well, when you first said commedia dell'arte, I thought, oh, no, what's the connection? But now I see, because you know, it's the somewhat farcical, the comedic elements of that I think show up in your plays. Remind me again of what you've done at Little Theater, because some people may have seen. I know we've done at least one evenings at 7. Is that it, or have you presented things there in addition?
I want to say they've done at least like 3 or 4 at the Little Theater
Yeah,
of my,
I thought
my
so.
readings. I know that a couple comedies of mine, uh, Final Arrangements, I think was one, and I know Funny Feelings and perhaps Champagne and Licorice was one of my dramedies as well, and then obviously this, the Ladykilling. So I think there's more than 3 or 4. I may be missing
Yeah,
something.
I was Final Arrangement. Was that the last one that you did? I think that's the one that I saw, and
Either
I met
that
you
or
after the show.
Yeah, either that or Funny Feelings. I know I did a couple the
Yeah,
last year or two. That was
Final Arrangements, I think, is the one. That title is ringing a bell more.
yeah, it was
Uh,
it was a farce that took place in a funeral home. But
yeah, that's the one. That's the
yeah,
one. Yes. And I can even remember where it was down in the Silk Room. For those of you who aren't familiar with our
yeah,
evenings at 7, and we normally hold them downstairs in the Silk Room, where if you attend a play upstairs, you will come down during intermission and have your refreshments. But if you're not familiar with evenings at 7, we are planning on a series of them remotely online as today, as the play that we're talking about today, which will be next week. So how did you? This is such an unusual topic, uh, and it's historical. I found it interesting from a historical point of view because it we'll talk about this in a bit. It reflects some of what the culture and the mores of the time were. But how did you come to write this?
so it was kind of interesting. I've only ever, this is like one of 2 pieces that are really like historical, I guess you'd say, dramas that I've ever written. Like I wrote one, I think when I was just out of college or the end of college, and then so that was like 16 years, no, 10 or 12 years ago. Um, so I wrote that one, and this piece came to me because I'm usually always looking for something to write. I get like a bug every few months to work on a new piece, and I literally was just going through some article online about theater, and it was like about talking about shocking or unusual facts about the theater. And then you just go by this one. It literally was like a bullet point on a list of shocking things in the theater. Like you could have just skimmed and you missed it, but it just said that this actress shot another actor on stage in 1899, and it was a little more dramatic in the bullet point that like in front of the whole audience, which isn't exactly what happened. But so she shot this other actor live on stage, and then I was like, well, that's interesting. And I started kind of like, and then I started pulling the thread and finding as much as I could, newspaper articles, and then I stumbled across this thesis about the death of ladyhood as well in the South at the time. So I just started reading more and more about it.
Yeah, I did a little research too. So was it difficult? Did you have to decide how you wanted, like what would you call the genre of this play? Is it
So it's kind of a dramatic autobiography. As she's trying to tell it through a lecture series. Because one of the things that was interesting about Julia Morrison James was, the actress in question was, after all the murder and trial that she was involved with, she also later attempted a lecture series, which was, more common then. And actually, it's funny because lectures are, popular again now with TED Talks and all that. But they were very, very popular at the time. And she tried writing one called The Other Side of Stage Life, which I almost consider that as the title of the play at one point. But it did not go well for her, the lecture series. But I thought that was interesting. And then I thought it was an interesting format as the play that she's talking directly to the audience as if it was a lecture series, but then add some more dramatic elements on top of it.
Yeah, because I think she even gave a little talk to the jury after the results of the trial.
Yeah, she gave a little. Yeah, she's very well spoken. She gave a kind of to break down to the audience her commentary that she wanted to give, her statements to the jury, her the prosecutors, and even the sister of the actor that she had killed.
And because I read a transcript of that, and I think she even said to the sister, if I could bring him back, I would. Well, if she hadn't shot him, she wouldn't have to be bringing him back. But anyway,
Right.
it kind of, I got the feeling that she really was, she liked the drama. She liked to be in the spotlight.
Well, I mean, I feel like there is definitely you can take that approach on it. I made some strong choices when I told the story in the play for the character, because she's also the narrator, and so she gets to frame everything the way she wants to frame it
Mhm.
and what she's dealing with. And whether or not you continue to believe her is still a question that I think is interesting and relevant to today.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I do too. Because she definitely had some reasons, didn't she?
She
According
made
to her.
accusations, and that's kind of the big thing I deal with in the
Yeah,
play, is like she made
yeah,
accusations and how she dealt with it. Um,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
and she spends the play kind of struggling with her own demons as best she can, because all the characters are kind of creations of her own. Like they're echoes of the past. They're not actually these characters or these people.
Yeah.
Um,
So they would appear. Now we're going to be seeing a reading, with people's faces, as those of you who have seen some things we've done since the pandemic. Uh, maybe at some point you could say a little bit about how, if this were to be staged, or maybe it has been, how would those people appear? In other words, she's apparently front and center.
Yeah, so a lot of this play it's a low set kind of unit set play, so it's very simple to stage. But because everything is kind of very fluid, how she's telling the story, and these other actors and characters are coming in and out of the show, a lot of it would have to be, technically, the most difficult part of the show would be lighting it and having that kind of have a very feel, almost like this lecture series has like a dreamlike quality to it as it goes on.
Yeah. How many characters, how many actors will we see when we're showing this?
So there are 5 actors in the show, her primarily, and then he technically represents the antagonist of the show. There's another actor, and then 3 others that are pretty much an ensemble of characters. They have a primary that they play throughout the show, but then they play various other characters.
Yeah.
There are 5 actors in the show. Characters, there's
So
many characters in the show.
the victim is the victim. May I ask if the victim appears at all?
Yeah, he actually acts as he does appear, and he also acts as an antagonist, or his part of the story is a large antagonist in the show.
Yeah.
And he is the only other actor than Julia in the show that plays the same character throughout.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how, I think you have presented this other places. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's still a developmental piece for me. So it has been read before, table reads and stage readings with audience feedback, and it has continued to evolve from there. It's always kind of improving. This has been a unique developmental opportunity in this virtual environment, since there's a lot of focus on the words themselves. Sometimes when you're, in my experience, when I've been developing a piece and you're watching the actors, and you have either in this case I had to direct it myself, but if we have another director involved, you can kind of get seduced by how much they've elevated the piece. You stop listening to your words, and sometimes you don't realize that a certain scene or the pacing or the dramatic action or just the word is not working, because you're just so focused on, wow, this actor's really good, or this director's doing such a great job with it. It's been a really unique thing, because they've kind of been stripped away, as much as that may be frustrating for the actors and directors. It's kind of been stripped away, and it's really just these actors saying the lines and emoting as much as they can in a little screen here, which is, it's still good for the audience. You're really focused on the words and what's happening and the pacing of the piece. So I think it's a unique developmental opportunity for a lot of writers and audiences, right? To be part of that process.
I wonder, when the play, I'm assuming that the play has a future in terms of probably being done as more than a reading, I hope.
That's the hope.
Do you think, having had this experience with the play being done as we're doing it upcoming, will maybe make you think again that you might have to revert back to some things that were in it when you wrote it, assuming it would be, on a stage?
It's an interesting question. So there were definitely scenes that I considered cutting or changing for the sake of the virtual reading, or like this virtual stage reading, that I ended up leaving in. And I want to see how the audience reacts to them, if I get any commentary on them, right? If they don't work, because there was some concern that they will work really great on stage, but maybe in this type of environment they don't. So that's a risk I took with the reading. It's a great question as far as would I pull them out or not, or if I'd gone another way with it, how would I feel about that?
Yeah, well, it occurred to me when you said that, you're still it's still kind of in workshop state. So are you like, there'll be changes in the next few weeks maybe, or however, in other words, the version that we're going to see is still a play in progress.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting to a very strong place. I don't think I would ever drastically change anything unless I had some epiphany on something. I made very strong choices with the play, and I'd like to stick with them as far as the heart of the story and where I decide. I made very clear choices as the writer in some areas on my interpretation or what I thought her interpretation of the events were, versus leaving it kind of gray and open to interpretation. I kind of wanted it because it's her. It wouldn't make sense to have it be gray if it was her, if she is the narrator, if she's in control of the story.
Yeah,
So,
particularly, she seems like a strong personality too. So,
and she was, and I do address certain things through other characters, much to her frustration, because it's kind of her dealing with her own insecurities. Like, infamously, she was not considered one of the better actors in the troupe, also. And there's some commentary on that as well, which is interesting. But she was not considered very strong. She was also not as experienced as a lot of the other actors in the troupe, and even though she had like a leading role in the show.
That's what the newspapers must have gotten to some of the other players in that particular show, because that's what they were saying too. So that
it's curious though how just the media worked in such a different way. And it's not that people didn't have strong editorials about things fast. It's just, they couldn't have had the same amount of information. I mean, there was an editorial, and I deal with that in the play, that came out not, I think, 5 or 6 days later after the shooting, with all these opinions about this actress. And I'm like, and it was in Louisiana that it came out, and this was a murder that happened in Tennessee. It's like, I just don't believe that that editorial was all that informed of the facts of the case.
Yeah.
And had strong things to say about her, and some very passionate, strong things to say about the victim as well, the Frank Leidenheimer, the man who was killed. And so there you go. It's not like today where you could, a journalist could probably get a handle on quite a lot of information in a short amount of time. But 5 days to know, to have this very passionate and aggressive editorial to come out 5 days after a murder is interesting.
Well, that was the impression I got when I read them. I thought, oh boy, this is. It was almost like, it was purple prose, yellow journalism. I mean, it was the kind of thing that you see in the Police Gazette. In fact, in one of the pieces I read, this may or may not be true, but apparently the victim, had called her a lousy actress on that.
Yeah, a lot of names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that true, do you think?
Yeah, the one thing that was consistent, that even though a lot of the cast and crew didn't really testify on her behalf, there was a lot of commentary I saw and read about them at least admitting that they did have quite a lot of heated words between the two of them over and over again. There's some direct quotes I use in the show between the two characters, pulled from the affidavits and court documents of what they actually said to each other, and things she said even the night of. Like, there's some direct quotes there as well. And not to, I don't want to spoil the more dramatic parts of the show, but there's direct things that she claimed that also were said, and then it's a question of whether or not you believe her.
Some of the things that reported would make the play relevant to today, because some of her accusations were definitely more serious than just being called a bad actress.
Just bad. Yeah, wasn't that? And I would be, I guess I'm skeptical of. Yeah, that would be the cause of why she killed him, is that he called her a few bad names, and said she was a bad actress. I definitely think there was, and there is enough evidence to say that there was a heated exchange going on between these two individuals.
Tell me if this is. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say it's just interesting. And I'm not sure, maybe your question was going to be down this vein. It's just like some of the other kind of bizarre things in the papers about other ladies at the time, because everyone was so concerned about the ladyhood, that they were going into her jail cell and helping like spruce it up for her, like adding flowers and.
Is that true?
That was a claim that I read, that some of the women in the community wanted to make sure that she had flowers and whatnot in her jail cell. And the paper also was worried about lady readers reading about the trial. So they made sure that they also talked about how her garments looked and how attractive her outfits were in court, because they wanted to make sure that they kept it juicy and relevant for lady readers, which is just ridiculous. It's like this murder trial. And they're like, well, it's of paramount importance to talk about what she wore to court that day.
Yeah, really. That whole business of ladyhood. See, of course, this was, even in America, it was called, the Victorian and the Edwardian era, even though that's really a British situation. But this was still kind of the end of it. And there was still that feeling of, and this was in Tennessee, this was definitely in the South. So there was sort of that, gone with the wind attitude about ladies and how they should behave and so forth. And that's what I was interested that someone had actually done a thesis or a book on that. And also how it kind of turned against her.
Yes, because it helped her, or in theory, it helped her in the trial, because they didn't deliberate for a very long time.
They didn't.
No, it was a very the trial was covered for, I think, a number of days. The jury deliberated very quickly. I think it was a matter of minutes. And but there's a lot of influence of this, this lady, this poor woman, and that was not a focus of even the facts of the case, just that her, possibly her ladyhood was put in jeopardy. She acted or reacted in a way so that she's excused from that.
Yeah.
And not a lot of thought put into the why. Now she gets acquitted, or not guilty. And then she wanted to talk about it, what happened. And it was seen that now you're trying to make this a financial upswing by having a lecture series. And that's when people turned against her.
Yeah, that's right. But she was lecturing quite soon after she walked out of the courtroom, I think. I don't think it took very long.
Right. And her approach was, and this is again where something I deal with in the play, is her approach was she wanted to talk about the other side of stage life, particularly the dangers of women in
Yeah.
theater.
Which I don't doubt was the case. And
Right.
also, my understanding is even at that period, which was starting, very close to the 20th century, I don't think the profession of acting for women was considered especially, well, it was, I guess, acceptable, sort of, but not a profession that was necessarily admired. Am I right about that?
I think it wasn't necessarily as virtuous as other like
Yeah,
vocations, I guess, for a woman at the
yeah,
time, or even a man at the time. Still.
yeah. And that's
Uh,
what's strange about that whole Victorian Edwardian period, that the veneer of propriety and how to behave and, calling piano legs limbs, that you couldn't in polite circles use the word legs, for example.
right.
That's an extreme example. But uh, and yet at the same time, when you see sculptures and art from that period, it's really quite provocative. So there's
Right.
a funny kind of dichotomy, going on. Uh, I'm really learning a lot of. It's been good to talk to you because uh, I have not yet seen this play, because this all
Okay.
kind of our planning all this kind of happened sort of fast. So I kind of relied on some of the research that I did, uh, just to be able to ask you some questions about that might
Sure.
be of interest to the audience. Um, could I just read one passage from one of the papers? Well, anyway, this was really it amused me because it reads this way: the sympathies of the entire company are with the murdered man, they claiming that the killing was unjustifiable and that the woman is an amateur. And I thought that was such an odd thing to say, like an amateur what? An amateur actress, therefore she
So
shouldn't, you know?
that's a great thing that I kind of harped on. So
Yeah,
and uh, there was a lot of siding against her, and I took the story again very strong from her perspective, and I guess you know any historical play, you're right. If you put any opinion into it, it's going to be a little bit more controversial. Not that there's a lot of people have strong opinions about this individual incident, but if they did the research, I could see somebody disagreeing. Like with any play with courtroom drama, you could have two opinions because that's literally what courtroom drama is. You have two
yeah.
opinions on what happened.
And you have different opinions among the jury often too. So
Right. So the play being from the perspective of the defendant, and in this case, and claims like that, they love to say the amateur and she was green. She was a green woman. That was one of the editorials written about her. But another interesting comment that even from her husband, and just something that my own thoughts about someone that's lived a life in theater since I was a kid, um, is this acceptable norms of behaviors in theater sometimes with men and women, the maybe the nature of uh, blurring lines between platonic relationships or platonic work relationships and unwanted advances and things like that, which the play deals with a little bit. And her husband had made a comment about that as well, where you have, because they had a very different lifestyle, which they were considered to be strange to the rest of the cast, because she was a married woman in a touring acting company. And that was
was he with
unusual.
her? Or was
Yeah,
he?
he traveled with her, which was also very weird for everyone. Like everyone else is like was very. It's almost that bohemian thing of like, well, they travel together, they share rooms together, and for her and her husband, that was just not how they operated. At least what from I was able to gather from the courtroom documents and statements from her and her husband. And they were both green, you could say, in the theater. But obviously, at some point, the the theater company in New York thought strongly enough about her that they gave her the leading role. So it's not that she wasn't without talent. So I think there could be a lot of other factors playing into that. And that's something that I against those concepts in the play with her and the other characters and some of their statements about how they saw her and her husband in the theater.
Yeah.
And how today, again, without getting into all the dramatic action of the latter half of the play, there's always this, anything negative said about, particularly like a man like Frank Leiden, who had been in the theater for 22 years. Like, well, he had been in the theater for 22 years, so there's no way he could have said these things to her or done these things to her. There's just no way. And how many times we see that today, even with these, in anywhere, it can be in any industry, but particularly in the arts or in, you see this more with celebrities because it's out in the open. We're discussing it more. But these people are like, well, how could this person have done any of these horrible things? They've been famous or they've been working for 20, 30 years. It's like, I can't believe this. And there's a lot of those echoes in the documents that I saw today. It's like, well, that's kind of irrelevant to whether or not this person's capable of saying or doing horrible things. I don't care how long he's been in the theater or how well he's liked in the theater. It wasn't necessarily relevant to what I wanted to talk about in the play.
No, and I thought it was amusing that there, in this quote that I just read, there seemed to be as much concern about the fact that she wasn't a good actress as that she shot the man. I mean, it was very
right. It's like,
it was really,
and like, you know, and I don't spend a lot of time on this in the play, and I know you and I have had opportunity to talk outside of this conversation. But they also talked about like her height and weight a lot too. Like, well, you know, she's also a large woman. You're like, what does that have to do with anything?
I know. It was very amusing. And I thought, oh boy, shades of what you read today in some of the.
Yeah, it was very, you had said yellow journalism earlier, and that's, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's just, and it was like they were looking for every explanation in the world to explain what to them was this like aberration. Like a woman killing a man on a stage with, you know, the number varies, but they say 1,500 to 2,000 people in the audience behind the curtain, who thought that they thought the gunshot was part of the play. They thought it was a sound effect or something off to the side of the play. And it wasn't until blood started passing the curtain that the audience then kind of went wild and was like, oh my God, something happened. As the band is still playing ragtime.
I read that too. It was that, apparently that was true, I guess. If they, because I read that as well. I do want to mention one thing too. We didn't talk about the name of the play that they were performing in. It was a farce called Mr. Plaster of Paris. You know?
Yeah, it's Mr. Plaster of Paris. Like it was like a sex farce kind of play. You know, dealing with like antics and bigamy and all this stuff. Which again was like this very sexual nature, sex farce play, and you know, none of us have a time machine, so we can't go there and sit there. But like, you know, you have this woman that you could have opinions about. Maybe she was very wordy, and maybe she liked the spotlight, but she could also be a very serious woman in a comedy with this very close-knit group. And you know, you could have had a lot of boundaries crossed for her that could have also contributed to what happened. But the play kind of deals with a lot of this.
Yeah, well, I think that's, you know, it's fascinating. I mean, it's a fascinating story, and it's the perfect kind of vehicle for, I would think, a playwright to say, well, all right, here are the facts. We know the one thing that we absolutely know is that she shot him dead.
Right. That's fact. Yeah.
That's the fact. And then, but all of this other gray material, not helped by the fact that you really don't know how much you can trust the newspaper accounts either. So,
right, or even the courtroom documents too are so they're not thorough, but they comment on everything, and then to your point, it's like it's in the newspaper articles and statements that people gave the newspaper.
Yeah, in one of the newspaper articles, here was this article reporting a murder, and at the end they said, "Oh, and by the way, the play had been doing very well up to that point." So, you know, there were a lot of people. going to it. So, well, not after that night, I suppose. I guess they,
Well, that's
unless
what
they
that
were an understudy, they probably didn't go on, right?
and that just kind of goes back to like it's interesting for people. I'd be curious to talk with the audience afterwards, just because it's anybody that sees the reading, or hopefully eventually I get to do it on its feet. And it's you have those statements, like you start to look at the logically, or Occam's razor, and you go, what's more likely here? Like, okay, everyone was saying she's amateur, she's terrible, but the show was doing really well, and she was the leading lady.
Yeah.
And you go,
Exactly. And with a crowd of over 1,000. I mean, it was at the Chattanooga Opera House. I mean, this wasn't,
and they had had a run in New York, I believe, for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
In August of that year. And so very successful enough to be like, hey, let's take this on the road.
Well, now I can hardly wait to see our showing. And I want to remind everyone that it will be shown at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, September 22nd, and then at 2 p.m., I believe, on Thursday, September 24th. And you, the audience, the people who are watching us now, I'm not sure when you're going to be seeing this, but it will be sometime before those dates. So you might still have time to sign up if you haven't already. And I want to thank you, Scott, very much for being here. Thank you, our producer, I guess I could say, is Billy Winter, for putting this together. I want to thank Dwayne Harris, our CEO, and I also want to thank Jamie Williams, who's on a committee that we have formed to make sure that we keep ourselves as much in front of the community as we can during this pandemic time. So thank you all for tuning in, and I can't say I'll see you at the theater at this play, but maybe we'll be watching at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, David.